What is going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Matt Selz, and this is another edition of Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. Selz, what's going on? How you doing? I don't think I get to talk to you enough during the week.
Yeah, I mean, we usually do the Family Times podcast, but usually they don't put our faces made for radio on these live streams very much. So
nice plug.
Hopefully we we don't break people's computer monitors here with our mugs. But
no.
I'm doing pretty good. Just plugging away on some stuff. We just updated. Hot off the presses, we updated the ultimate cheat sheet here at Fantasy Alarm earlier today. Would have been up sooner, but then David Montgomery had to go and scare everybody. So took a little longer to update.
Yep, and we're still waiting, and it's going to be updated yet again when we figure out how long David Montgomery is going to be out because he strained his groin in practice, and that's what we call not ideal. And Selz, this opens up a whole mess of conversations that we can have. We're going to talk about the running back position. We're going to talk about draft value. We're going to talk about who takes over, where right now you're looking. We don't know how much time he's going to be out. Will he be there for the start of the season? I mean, overall, Selz, before we even go into injured David Montgomery talk, were you a David Montgomery guy when it came to fantasy football drafting? Because I had 0 shares of him.
I was partially interested. It depended on where he was falling. I wasn't going to reach for him. But, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly Chicago is doing with their backfield from year to year. Everybody thought somebody else was going to be the breakout last year, and then that didn't really happen, and it showed up that Monty was the breakout, and now there's, some talk that there might be some other, they've also got 7 tight ends. Who knows what they're going to do with all 7 of these tight ends they've got. So, and a quarterback battle. They've got Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, who I guess combined make one solid quarterback, but probably not separate. So I didn't really have that many shares of David Montgomery at this point. I don't know that this news really changes anything because usually it's a couple of week time frame to get back. He's still got about 3 weeks or so until week 1. So I don't know that this injury really changes anything for me. It's just more the coaching staff and system that's kind of up in the air.
I mean, let's talk about Tariq Cohen for a second because that's someone that we're going to see start to move up a little bit. And I was looking at our ADPs on the site, and when it came to Tariq Cohen, just seeing him go overall in that 10th round area, I mean, I would look at him in the 9th. I mean, maybe not pay starter's price for him, but when I'm starting to look for that running back depth, he's someone that has standalone value, especially in the passing game a little bit more. And if Montgomery has to miss a couple of games, because we've seen how certain athletes have reacted to groin strains when it comes to that recovery time, really unknown right now. I mean, Tariq Cohen definitely moves up a round or two. Does he pique your interest more? Because I was interested in him already because of the value. Now, obviously, even more.
Yeah, I mean, especially in PPR formats. And by the way, if you're not playing PPR formats, you're kind of doing it wrong at this point. Tariq Cohen was the much more intriguing one for me out of that backfield. He's kind of like a poor man's Kareem Hunt, basically, because you can get him a few rounds later than Kareem Hunt is going at the moment. Now his value might shoot up a little bit because people are going to be a little bit, concerned with Monty's injury here. And you're right. If he misses a game or two, then Tariq Cohen is good enough to be a standalone back for them. He was before Montgomery showed up anyway. So, and if their quarterbacks are getting pressured, which, let's face it, they might be because they're Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, dump-off passes are always the best friend of the running back in a PPR format. So I do have some significant interest in Tariq Cohen, yeah.
Yeah, but he'll continue to move up. And will they end up getting a Devonta Freeman? I mean, this is the mind of a fantasy player. Immediately, it's not let's assess the injury. It's immediately depth chart. Who's next? Who's still out there? Who can they sign? And that's really what it is right now, Selz, because we're going to talk a little bit more about COVID and the potential impact it can have on our fantasy seasons and what we have to do to combat that, especially all you league commissioners out there. But Selz, at this point with us, I mean, the running back position is very hard to gauge once you're out of that second round. There are a lot of running backs that have risk to them, whether it's injury or not being involved enough. For instance, Todd Gurley, James Conner going around the same time, Montgomery now around later after them. How are you handling the running back position? Because I'm trying to wait and hold out for FA favorite Jordan Howard as much as I can. Maybe even Kareem Hunt as well. I have one share of Singletary. But in between those tiers is another tier with a lot of risk, and I'm looking at Le'Veon Bell when I say that as well.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell's risk is his head coach, who inexplicably today...
Every Jets player's risk is Adam Gase.
Yeah, pretty much. Who came out today and said he likes Frank Gore and implied that he and Le'Veon Bell may split carries.
Yeah, wait, can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
Adam Ronis, I'm talking to you right now. If you are watching this stream, and why aren't you? Because you can learn something just like everybody else can. Adam Ronis, if you are watching this stream, I am coming after you on Alarm After Hours on Sirius XM tonight. Because when I brought up Frank Gore, you yelled at me for even thinking that he can have some kind of involvement. Now I've seen multiple reports that they're going to utilize this guy. So that's fair warning right there to everybody out there and to you, Ronas. I'm coming after you because I'm seeing multiple reports, and it's not going to be Bell's backfield. Back to you.
I mean, why wouldn't you? He might be 875 years old, but he's still productive.
Why. That's exactly why.
Right, but he was still productive in Buffalo last year, right? I mean,
kept Singletary's production down for the first half of the
exactly.
season.
So, and Gase has never wanted Bell. He made that known from day one that he was there. He basically tried to ship him out before he officially had the job. Picked a GM that would, I guess, go with his view on Le'Veon Bell not being worth everything they signed him for, I guess. I don't know. But Todd Gurley, the knees are a concern. I know that, he was pretty productive for the Rams last year, but they also did, tend to carry him along here fairly slowly, at least early in the year. And then we kind of saw him not really get played in the playoffs when they made their playoff run either. So the knees do scare me. The Falcons, for all of the passing yards that they rack up, they also do give their running backs a shot pretty regularly. I mean, there's a reason Devonta Freeman was at one point a top 2-round running back. He got the volume to be that. So I'm less concerned with Todd Gurley because there's a roadmap as to how to keep him productive throughout the year. James Conner, I actually feel stronger about James Conner this year than I did last year because there's Ben Roethlisberger's back. They've got more weapons back, healthy. Juju Smith-Schuster's back. So all of the, passing weapons that are back for the Steelers this year take some pressure off of James Conner. So I do feel better about James Conner this year than I did heading into last year.
I feel better about the entire Steelers offense when it comes to fantasy sells. I mean, all of them at great value, going from Juju down to Deontay Johnson, another guy who was hurt for a lot of the year. You get him in the 7th round. Juju.
And how about Eric Ebron?
I know. You could get him in the 11th or the 12th, and that's fine. Don't worry as much about Vance. Ebron is going to be productive. He is my starting tight end in 1 or 2 leagues already. So that just shows right there how great the value is in James Conner as well. I'm open to him more than I am to Bell or Gurley. So like you, I feel the same way. So I do have one share of him thus far. I'm sitting there late 3rd, and I haven't gone with a running back at that point, or I do have one, and I don't love the receivers, or even on the back turn, I feel I could get another good receiver. Then, yeah, I'll go after James Conner. I'm not stuck. If there's anything that I feel like our subscribers and audience cells should understand this year more than any, we've really pushed there's not one blueprint, there's not one way to draft, and to read the draft room more than just going with a set of rankings or even just looking at your own queue, but reading the draft room and then working your draft in accordance to that. I feel like we're pushing that this year more than any.
Yeah, I agree, because in years past, it's always been running back. You have to start running back. Otherwise, you're shut out of the position, and you just can't win if you don't have a running back. And now this year, it's like, okay, well, if you take one running back early, like if you're in the top half of the draft, you can hammer a good RB1 and then just ride the wide receiver train until about round 5 or 6 and get, you can fill in with RB2s. Again, it's going to come down to reading your league and see how the runs in the draft are happening. If everybody's waiting on tight ends and quarterbacks, then you should wait on tight ends and quarterbacks. Right. Don't, because as soon as one goes off the board, people are going to jump to it. So if you're the first one to take one, you've either cost yourself value at another position or you started a train that didn't necessarily need to be put on the tracks at that point. So, there's certainly multiple ways of drafting this year. I personally don't subscribe to the zero running back strategy.
Neither do I.
I never felt comfortable with that. I feel like if you're going to take a stud running back, then you take that stud running back, and if they get injured, then they get injured. There's no because here's the thing: if you go zero running back, and then all of your backup running backs get injured in the few plays they play, then you're still out of luck, and you're even worse off because you've got, literally nobody else on the waiver wire. So I just never liked the zero running back strategy.
I don't think a lot of people understand what it is exactly. I know Howard Bender has brought that up before on Twitter that, and I forget if it was round 3 or round 4, but
I think it's round 5.
Yeah, it's starting your draft with 2 non-running backs and then going running back. That's not zero running back.
Right, exactly. Don't go like wide receiver, and then say, ooh, round 3 I got this RB1 caliber dude that actually slipped and fell. Like, right. That's not zero running back. Zero running back is going like wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, then running back. Or, you just wait a while on running back so you don't get the, Nick Chubbs or obviously the top 4 guys or James Connors of the world or, heck, maybe even the David Johnsons of the world. You go further down than that and you're just going to mix and match throughout the year.
Now, I'm going to say this, and I think it should be left unsaid, but I'm still going to say it anyway. If you're on either end of the draft where you're picking, don't go with the zero running back theory.
No, you're going to need one because by the time it gets back to you,
you're not going to have a balanced roster.
If you're at the front end of the draft, if you have the number 1 pick and you don't take Christian McCaffrey,
Michael Thomas,
Zeke or Barkley, then you probably shouldn't have been given that pick in the first place. Well, they gave you that one because they knew you were going to hand somebody else's stud running back later in the draft. So maybe they intentionally did it. But yeah, if you're in the top 4 picks, you basically have to go running back.
I was going to ask you, is it top 3 or top 4 for you? Like, do you feel like it's necessary at the number 4 spot that you go with a Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara? Or are you going to go with a Michael Thomas and try to employ a zero running back strategy?
It would be, so at the number 4 spot, it would be Dalvin Cook for me.
Right.
It wouldn't be Kamara. I don't trust Kamara that much, frankly. I've never really had any shares of Alvin Kamara. But you can make the argument that it would be the big 3 with McCaffrey and Barkley and Zeke. But to me, I think Dalvin Cook should be in there. I believe the holdout will end, and he'll be on the field week 1, much like Ezekiel Elliott managed to do last year. But if you do go Dalvin Cook, you got to make sure you have Alexander Mattison, behind him because you're going to want to share that Vikings running game. So that's the only issue with taking Cook is that you have to get his handcuff. The other ones, the handcuffs aren't really worth it to take. Like Tony Pollard's not really.
Nah, he's not.
He's the closest one to filling in the production of Zeke. I mean, does anybody know who's behind Christian McCaffrey in Carolina?
No,
I think it's the bus driver. I think I think that's their backup running back. And Barkley, I mean, we've seen Wayne Gallman get shots. We've seen other guys get shots. They just don't do anything. So it's clearly Barkley or bust in the Giants running game.
Yeah, so that's where you're going to have to decide how to use those picks once you're done paying starters price. Now, someone that you didn't mention as a handcuff that could be of use a little bit early on, Chase Edmonds. And we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see what the deal with Kenyon Drake is off of going in the first round. But that's where all of a sudden an overdraft is necessary. And as someone who's looking in that 10th, 11th round area for another running back that might have some standalone value, maybe I go after him now that I'm seeing Drake is a little banged up.
Yeah, I mean, he's also proven to have standalone value in the last few seasons as well, because we've seen him be the starter when David Johnson was out. And when they had the gap year between having David Johnson and really anybody else, because Kenyon Drake wasn't there yet. So Chase Edmonds has been a starter for the Cardinals. He's been decently productive. He's not an RB1 like Kenyon Drake was down the stretch last year for sure. But he's a serviceable guy. He could be a flex option or a low-grade RB2 in a pinch.
You just need those guys to be able to fill in for a weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is how I think of it. Christian McCaffrey, and I asked Pemba about this a while back because he had the first overall pick for Scott Fishbowl, and playoffs start week 13. So you're without Christian McCaffrey, who's on bye when playoffs are starting. So in theory, I mean, does 1 week, even that critical of a week, keep you from drafting Christian McCaffrey? And to me, the answer is no 1,000 times out of 1,000. But that's where all of a sudden now you have Christian McCaffrey and you can wait a little on running backs, start to help your depth in the 9th, 10th round, and then grab maybe someone like a Chase Edmonds so that can fill in for 1 week, and that's it. That's the way I see it when it comes for depth running backs. I don't feel like I have to shoot my expectations to the moon in order to convince myself to draft them.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the number 1 overall pick, I'm not going to let a bye week dissuade me from making a number 1 overall pick. Where the bye week would come in is for the depth consideration. Like, I'm now going to make sure that at least one of my running backs that I'm counting on doesn't also have a week 13 or a conflict with with another bye, because I know I'm going to need a guy to fill in for McCaffrey. Now, hopefully you wind up with getting a first round bye in the playoffs and you don't have to worry about that bye week.
That's the way you think. That's
the hope
right there, Selz.
That's the hope, is that, hey, with McCaffrey, I'm going to dominate this league. I'll be the number 1 seed. I won't have to worry about his bye week, and then I'll get him back and start dominating again on the other side of the bye week. But we all know that's, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, as Mike Tyson used to say. So, everybody is in love with their draft after they're done with it. Just listen to the actual GMs of the NFL draft. They could have drafted literally dumpster fires and they'd be selling you the upside of them, because that's just what everybody does in draft season. So, yeah, if I had the number 1 overall pick, I'm not going to let Christian McCaffrey's week 13 bye week dissuade me. And also, if you're in a league where, like, week 13 is the week before the playoffs, then who cares? Like, unless you need that week to make the playoffs, then that's a stinger. But that also tells me you probably could have made like 3 or 4 other moves during the season that would have won you games that wouldn't have put you in that position down the stretch anyway.
Yeah, and here's something that Ronas and I talked about the other night, and that was how everybody's going to be obsessed and thinking about last season when it came to waivers and the running back position. It's not like that every year, and I'm one of those people. I am. I was guilty of it in one of my drafts. We've talked about it, Selz. In our SiriusXM host draft, I took, out of essential fear, I took Devin Singletary. Not one of my active targets, but I knew who I was in the league with, so I knew my opponents, which is a big strategy of mine, is knowing who my opponents are likely to target. I thought I was going to be really stuck for my second running back if I didn't go with Singletary or Kareem Hunt at the time. And I learned after that you'll still be able to be active on the waiver wire. Last year was very bare. It's not going to be like that every year. And I think people are just so focused on what happened last year, they forget about the previous 3 years before that.
Yeah, I mean, each of the last 3 years, I swear there's a championship caliber, like a running back that helped you win a championship on the waiver wire.
Selz, I was in the championship. Selz, 2 years ago, I was in my home league championship, and I had lost running backs to injuries. And I remember I was starting Kalen Ballage and Jamal Williams, both who I picked up that week, by the way. Ballage was a bust. Hardly did anything. Jamal Williams, that week, and I believe it was week 16 2 seasons ago, he had about 25 points in a half-point PPR. Nearly stole me the championship.
Yeah, I had...
that was 2 years ago, and that was me being able to pick up a running back who most would consider to be a scrub if you look at him overall, and he nearly won me my championship. I picked him up week 16.
Yeah, I was in a league 2 years ago, and then I stopped doing this league because it was set up so dumbly. The championship was on week 17.
Dumbly? Is that a word? Dumbly?
I don't know, but I think I just made it up. I'm going to roll with
dumbly.
It was set up super dumb. How about that? Now I sound super dumb for using the non-word dumbly.
I like made-up words. Dumbly.
So the championship was week 17, right, of the NFL season. I had a flat out dominant team. Like, I think I had Mahomes as a quarterback. I had, like, whoever it was. They were.
Why
all
was it week 17? Can you answer me that first?
I don't know, because it was.
I'm not going to be able to focus on your roster without knowing that. You want to talk about Dumbly? That's Dumbly.
And here's the thing: I didn't know it until after, like, we were like 3/4 of the way through the season. I checked and realized, oh no, week 17.
Man.
I just assumed.
We talk about on this site all the time. We talk about it all the time. You're on podcasts with me every week, and I say the same thing every week, that you got to look at your rules and settings.
That's why I left this league after 1 year, because the guy was like, I tried to convince him, like, we got to move this thing up. Like, it's got to be week 16. Week 17, you should never base anything in fantasy football off week 17.
No, nobody. You're $1 million in DFS week 17.
Right. So nobody went with me because they knew how strong my roster was. I had like 9 starting roster spots, and all of them were in the top 5 in their position, like in scoring averages. So the problem became that everybody sat week 17 because the teams were good and they had already clinched a playoff spot in real life. So I had to go and literally make like an entire roster switch for the championship, and I found, like, I basically streamed it and was like, okay, this running back actually has a pretty decent matchup, and this guy has pretty decent matchup in wide receivers. And I came 4 points shy of winning the championship but if you look at the roster that I had on my bench, it was like Travis Kelce and Kareem Hunt the year he was real awesome for the Chiefs. And, just a whole stud level amount of roster spots on the bench, and I almost won because you can find depth in the waiver wire. That was the whole point of this elongated story. You can find depth throughout the season on the waiver wire, including in week 17 when your championship is on the line and you almost pull it off with basically a dumpster fire of a roster that you're streaming for that week.
You just couldn't do it last year.
No.
Last year was the only year. I have never seen it so bare before.
You and I both fell for the running back in Detroit. Yeah, we both fell for it in different leagues, and that did not work.
That was the most I ever bid and spent on a player. Ty Johnson, $78.
So last year it didn't work, but expect it to be very different this year, especially with the nature of COVID and how many rookie running backs were taken that went to places that already had featured backs.
Oh, a nightmare when it came to fantasy because of that.
Yeah, so there's going to be running back depth on the waiver wire because there's going to be rookie backs that are going to come in and produce when the other guys get injured that aren't getting drafted because they're in timeshares or not worth draft spots or whatever. So there'll be depth on the running back waiver wire.
So you mentioned COVID, and that brings us to this, Selz. And when it comes to COVID, and I'm already seeing it with some of the leagues that I'm in, a decent amount of the sites don't have designated COVID spots. They have IR spots, and that's it. And I'm noticing that there are commissioners out there that are refusing to add more IR spots because they're afraid that people will take advantage and just stash until one of their players has COVID, in which, to me, I don't feel like that's something that should prevent more IR spots. I mean, if they're on the IR, they're on the IR. There are only so many players you're actually going to stash in the NFL. It's not like it's the NBA where you have like 10 days, or the MLB 10 days, and then they're back and that's it. So you stash away. It's different. So let me ask you this here. When it comes to IR/COVID spots, how many do you think are acceptable for, let's just say, a 12-team league, for argument's sake?
So for me, the whole argument of stashing guys on the IR doesn't really make a lot of sense because you can't pick up a dude and put them immediately on the IR. So apologize for whatever background noise you may hear next minute. One of my kids has escaped their room, so there's going to be some kid toys.
And she agrees, so you're in consensus there.
Yeah. So you can't pick up a dude who's listed as out and stash him on the IR immediately in most leagues. Usually that still requires an ad drop. The only way you're going to stash a guy on the IR is if they're already on your roster, they get ruled out, and then you put them on there. But it also depends on what your IR qualifications are, because there are some leagues where a guy could be questionable and you could put them on IR. There are a lot of leagues where if they're listed as out, they can go on IR. And then obviously if they're listed on IR, you can put them on IR. But to me, I would say this year I would go with, in a 12-team league, I'd probably go with 3 guys. Seems about right to me. Right. Just because you don't want to, my problem is you don't want to cost somebody a run at a championship because you're the guy that believes there's cheating involved in IR spots. Like, it should just be, if a guy gets COVID, it's not the fantasy, league, or it's not the team manager's fault that the guy got COVID. So you should let them just put him on the IR spot for like a week. Right. It's the same as letting a guy be out for a week and then coming back. It's, there's basically no difference in my book.
Yeah, I think 3 is very fair. And that's what I'm using. Right now, my 12, even if it goes up to 14, I'm still thinking about keeping 3 as well. I think that's a very fair number, but not adding them just because you can't designate. Here's the other thing, Selz, and this is the underlying argument of what I just brought up. Commissioner's job is already going to be hard enough. They have to have a contingency plan in order. We've talked about that a lot. But when it comes to something like a COVID list or an IR, they're going to have to police everyone's team a lot more. I'm sorry, commissioners. You're going to have to do it. It's unavoidable. If there isn't a written rule that you can't stash players that aren't on the IR or injured, whatever it is, then someone's going to take advantage of that. So you better put that in the rules, and you better be scrolling through everybody's team. I'm sorry. It's a thankless job, especially in 2020, being a fantasy sports commissioner. You still want a league. You still want some sense of reality. You want to do things your way. I know the whistle blew, so my time might be up. At the same time, you have to understand you have to police it a bit more, just like we're hearing. Sound effects are perfect.
Yeah, apparently my 3-year-old disagrees with your take on that one. Though I completely agree.
She's part of the force. She's part of the policing that's taking place when it comes to having to go through everybody's team every week and make sure that they're not just hoarding players.
Yeah, that's also why I never sign up to be league commissioner, because I just don't want that time taken out of my day.
It sucks.
I'm not going to deal with it. I will start a political argument, but I'm not going to get involved and try to settle one. Like, that's not what I sign up for fantasy sports to do. If I want to have a debate about something like that, I'll save it for Twitter or Facebook. I'm not in fantasy sports to have a debate between what roster construction is fair in a league or what. Like, if you want to debate the fairness of a trade, okay, but we're still not going to veto them. We're just going to debate the fairness. Yeah, I mean, being commissioner of a league this year is going to be incredibly tough, especially depending on, if you have to make sure everybody sets their roster by lock time.
That's not on you.
No, well,
you just have to you have to make sure they're not just stashing players because the website they're playing on won't force them to take them off and ban them from making moves until they address it.
Well, that's true. That's true. If you have a guy that's sitting on your IR spot that's no longer listed as out or IR, and you're playing on a site that doesn't force you to move that, then you've got to switch sites because it's frankly stupid. Like,
dumbly.
It's dumbly for a site to do that. That one's going to make an appearance, I think, tonight when we record Family Times, I think.
That's going to make an appearance a lot. Let me tell you. I love it. I love your new word. We learned something new today, everybody.
So if you're on a site that doesn't require a guy to make a move to get another guy off the roster before, if you have a guy sitting on the IR spot and they're actually playing, then your site should force them to get that guy out of the IR spot before picking up anybody else. So if that's the case, then that's on the site and not necessarily the commissioner.
Right. And again, if I know it's on the site and a lot of you won't switch, but if you're not going to, then yes, you are going to have to be the ones that make sure that that's not the case, and make sure you write it in your rules as well because that's going to be very important because you don't want any kind of loopholes. We have enough with what's going on with COVID. He is Matt Selz at the Selz Man on Twitter. I'm Justin Fensterman at Fensty Sports. We're always here to help, including setting up your leagues and making sure you are ready to execute them correctly and with complete organization. Selz, it's been real, man. Always a good time catching up with you.
It's always fun to be on these live streams. We got Family Times recording tonight. NASCAR coverage coming out for the unpredictable Daytona race on Saturday night. We got football. There's baseball prospect piece coming out later today from yours truly. There's football tools getting put up. The lineup generator will be up later this week for those that want to get busy building DFS lineups already. Why? I don't know, but you can go ahead and do that. So we got a lot of stuff happening here at Fantasy Line.
Yep, absolutely. And we're keeping up with everything regarding projections for our lineup generator for NBA. Also ADP TV for fantasy football. I've got more videos coming out tracking the latest trends, and also Alarm After Hours on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio all week long, 1 to 3 a.m. Eastern, or on demand if you don't want to take the late trip with Adam Ronis and myself. Got a lot of content, but that's what it takes to dominate. That's what we do. Why is that? There isn't any other option. We just win.